Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive on authentic happiness. We're going to be looking at Martin Seligman's book, Authentic Happiness, and in it he lays out a really practical and research-backed approach to happiness. It's not just about fleeting moments of joy, but a much deeper and more lasting sense of fulfillment. Um, One of the really interesting things is that Seligman suggests there are actually three distinct paths to happiness. And get this. He says that each of us has these unique signature strengths that we can use to kind of, get us there. So we're going to dive into all of that today. We'll even look at some exercises that you can try out, like right now.
Yeah, that's right. And what I think is so fascinating is how Seligman challenges that sort of traditional idea. The one that says happiness is just about seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. He says it's not quite as straightforward as that. For instance, have you ever heard people say that winning the lottery is like the key to happiness?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like they think they'd be set for life, right?
Right. Well, there was a study by Brickman and his colleagues back in 1978, and they actually found that lottery winners, after like a year, they reported no significant difference in their overall happiness levels compared to a control group. It's this thing called hedonic adaptation, which is basically our tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness even after we experience these major positive events.
So you're saying just chasing those pleasurable moments isn't really going to cut it?
Exactly. Seligman proposes a different model entirely. He breaks happiness down into three dimensions: the pleasant life, the engaged life, and the meaningful life.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these three dimensions.
All right, so think of it like baking a cake, a really delicious cake. The pleasant life is kind of like the icing, those super enjoyable, pleasurable moments we all love. But just like icing, it's not the whole cake, right?
Yeah, okay, I see where you're going with this. So then what would be the filling in our happiness cake?
That, my friend, would be the engaged life. It's all about finding flow. That state where you're so absorbed in something that you totally lose track of time. Like, imagine you're working on this really challenging puzzle, you're totally focused, and time just seems to melt away. That's flow, and that's where our signature strengths come into play.
You mean those unique talents and abilities that we all have?
Okay.
I've heard about those. But how do they tie into happiness?
Well, each of us has these specific strengths that when we actually use them, they can help us enter those flow states more easily. So Seligman encourages us to really identify and leverage those strengths so that we can find more fulfillment in all areas of our lives.
So it's not just about knowing what you're good at, but actually putting those strengths to work to create those moments of flow.
Precisely. Now, what do you think is the base of our happiness cake? What do you think holds it all together?
Well, if the icing is pleasure and the filling is engagement, I'm guessing the base has to be something a little more substantial, something with more, depth.
You got it. That's the meaningful life. And this dimension goes way beyond just personal satisfaction. It's about connecting to something larger than ourselves, contributing to something that gives our lives, a sense of purpose.
Okay, so things like volunteering or activism or even raising a family would fall into this category.
Exactly. Those activities often tap into our desire to make a difference in the world, which can lead to a really profound sense of meaning and fulfillment.
This cake analogy is really helpful. So we've got the icing, the filling, and the base. But what about the ingredients? How do we even figure out what goes into our own, unique happiness cake?
Well, this is where Seligman's work on character strengths is so insightful. He developed this thing called the VIA classification of strengths and virtues, and it identifies 24 core strengths. These strengths are categorized into 6 virtues: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And each of these strengths has its own unique role to play in contributing to our happiness.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So by understanding these strengths, we can start to see how they fit into our overall, pursuit of happiness.
Exactly. For example, under the virtue of wisdom, you've got the strength of curiosity. So if you're a curious person, you're constantly learning, exploring, finding joy in discovering new things, all of which can definitely contribute to your happiness. Or take perseverance, which falls under courage. Someone with strong perseverance is able to overcome obstacles and achieve their goals, which leads to a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction.
So it's not just about striving for any kind of happiness. It's about understanding our strengths and finding fulfillment through activities that allow us to actually use them.
You got it. And that's one of the key things that sets Seligman apart. He doesn't just, stop at theory. He provides these really practical tools and exercises to help us apply these concepts in our daily lives.
Okay, I am really curious to hear about these exercises. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear a bit more about the shift in psychology that Seligman's work kind of represents. He's considered one of the pioneers of positive psychology, right?
Yes, absolutely. His work was really instrumental in shifting the focus of psychology, moving away from just fixing what's wrong. And instead, also building on what's right. It doesn't ignore challenges, of course, but it complements traditional approaches by focusing on cultivating our strengths and our positive emotions.
So it's kind of like tending a garden, right?
Yeah.
You need to pull out the weeds, but you also need to nourish the flowers that you want to see bloom.
That's a great analogy. Positive psychology helps us cultivate those inner blooms. It's about nurturing our well-being, not just, treating mental illness.
I love that. Okay, so are we ready to dive into some of the practical exercises Seligman suggests for boosting our happiness?
Yeah, let's get practical. Seligman outlines a bunch of exercises in authentic happiness, but let's maybe focus on a few key ones that you can start using right away.
Okay, perfect. I'm ready to put these ideas into action. What's the first exercise?
Let's start with the gratitude letter. So this one is all about expressing gratitude to someone who's made a real difference in your life, but who you haven't properly thanked. The idea that let's sit down and write a really heartfelt letter detailing what they did and how it impacted you.
Okay, that sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
What makes this so powerful, though? Is it just the act of writing the letter, or is there something more to it?
It goes a step further. The key is to actually deliver the letter in person and read it out loud to the recipient.
Wow. I can imagine that would be a pretty emotional experience.
Yeah.
For both people involved.
Exactly. It's about taking that time to really appreciate someone and express that appreciation in a tangible way. There's actually research by Randy Sansone and Lori Ann Sansone that was published in the journal Psychiatry, and it suggests that expressing gratitude can have a really profound impact on both the giver and receiver. It can boost happiness and strengthen relationships.
Wow, so it's like a double dose of happiness. What's the next exercise we can try?
Okay, so the next one is the 3 blessings exercise. This one is super simple and only takes like a few minutes each day. Basically, before you go to sleep, just take a moment to write down 3 good things that happened during the day, no matter how small they are.
So it could be anything from like having a really delicious lunch to having a productive meeting at work.
Exactly. And then for each good thing, you reflect on why it happened. This helps you shift your focus to the positive aspects of your day, and it really helps cultivate a sense of gratitude and contentment.
It's like training your brain to notice and appreciate the good stuff instead of dwelling on the negative. I like that. Now, what about those signature strengths that we talked about earlier? Does Seligman have any exercises that are specifically related to those?
He does. He challenges us to find new and creative ways to use our signature strengths in our daily lives. The key here is to be intentional about it.
So, for example, if I know one of my strengths is creativity, I can make an effort to incorporate that into my work projects, even if they're not traditionally seen as creative tasks.
That's a great example. Or let's say you're someone who's naturally empathetic. You might look for opportunities to provide support to colleagues or volunteer at an organization that aligns with your values.
I'm starting to see how these exercises can really make a difference in how we approach our daily lives. It's not just about, abstract ideas, but about concrete actions that we can take.
Exactly. And there's one more exercise I want to highlight, and that's savoring. This one is all about slowing down and truly appreciating those positive moments, whether they're big or small.
I'm definitely guilty of rushing through things sometimes. Like I'll eat a delicious meal without really tasting it because I'm already thinking about what I need to do next.
Yeah, we've all been there. Savoring is about being present in the moment and fully experiencing those positive sensations and emotions. It's like hitting the pause button on life and allowing yourself to truly enjoy that first sip of coffee in the morning or a beautiful sunset.
Okay, I'm definitely going to try that. So we've got all these great exercises, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic. But I also know that life isn't always sunshine and rainbows. So how does Seligman address the challenges that we inevitably face in life? Does he think we can just, exercise our way out of any difficulty?
Of course not. Seligman acknowledges that maintaining happiness isn't always easy. We all encounter setbacks, disappointments, difficult situations.
So how do we apply these principles when things get tough?
Well, he points out that negative thinking and hedonic adaptation, that tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness even after positive events, those things can be real obstacles to lasting happiness. But he does offer some practical strategies for overcoming these challenges.
Okay, I'm all ears. I need all the help I can get with that.
One really powerful technique is reframing. Instead of dwelling on the negative aspects of a situation, try to reframe it as a learning opportunity.
So, for example, if I get rejected after a job interview, instead of getting discouraged, I can ask myself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I improve my interviewing skills for next time?
Exactly. It's about shifting your perspective from this is terrible to what can I gain from this?
That's a really helpful way to look at it. What other strategies does Seligman suggest?
Another strategy is seeking novelty. When we get stuck in routines, it's easy to fall into a rut and lose that sense of excitement and engagement.
So we need to shake things up a bit.
Precisely. Trying new things, breaking out of our comfort zones, and exposing ourselves to new experiences can help combat hedonic adaptation and keep life feeling fresh and exciting.
So that could be anything from trying a new restaurant to learning a new skill to traveling to a new destination.
Exactly. It's about injecting a little bit of novelty and adventure into your life to keep those happiness vibes flowing.
This is all starting to make so much sense. Seligman's approach is so refreshing because it combines scientific research with practical advice. Advice that we can actually implement in our lives.
That's one of the things that makes his work so impactful. He's not just telling us to be happy. He's giving us concrete tools and strategies to cultivate authentic happiness.
And it's a reminder that happiness isn't some magical destination we arrive at, but a journey that we're all on.
Absolutely. It's about making conscious choices and developing habits that support our well-being.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on happiness and a toolkit full of strategies to work with.
Me too. It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you.
It really is empowering to think that we have more control over our happiness than we might realize. Seligman's work, reminds us that it's not just about luck or circumstance, but about the choices that we make and the habits that we cultivate.
Right. And remember that journey to authentic happiness is unique for each individual. What works for one person might not work for another. So Seligman encourages us to explore all three dimensions of happiness. The pleasant life, the engaged life, and the meaningful life. And really see what resonates most with us.
So it's like creating our own personalized happiness recipe.
Exactly. And authentic happiness gives us the ingredients and the instructions to do just that. Whether it's practicing gratitude, using our signature strengths, savoring those positive moments, or reframing challenges, we have a whole toolkit full of strategies to help us on our way.
Yeah, I love how practical and actionable his approach is. It's not just feel-good fluff. It's backed by research, and it offers concrete steps that we can take to create positive change in our lives.
And it all comes back to the idea that happiness is not a destination. It's a journey. It's about continually learning and growing and finding ways to live a life that is both enjoyable and meaningful.
Well said. This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of happiness and a renewed sense of optimism about cultivating it in my own life.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you, and I hope our listeners feel inspired to take some of these insights and apply them to their own lives.
To all our listeners out there, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into authentic happiness. We encourage you to pick up the book and delve even deeper into Seligman's work. And as you continue on your own journey to authentic happiness, we leave you with this thought-provoking question.
What one small step can you take today to incorporate one of these exercises or ideas into your life?
Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep those happiness vibes flowing.